Sirens. I hear things. This is the Conqueror GC. This is a British Tier 10 SPG. That's nice camo. Oh, look at all the lemmings. Oh. That's my lemming noise. That's what lemmings actually sound like. I grew up on a lemming farm. You know, my parents were actually farmers. In Italy, a lot of people grew tobacco. And I can't say what form of government they had, but let's just say that the government was the only one who could buy the tobacco. My father said they weren't even allowed to keep one tobacco leaf. The government was the only legal buyer of the tobacco. So, you know, my parents grew up on farms. My aunts and uncles, they all grew up on farms. And, you know, when your parents grew up raising animals, they kind of treat you like you're an animal. You know, one day I realized, I said, Mom, you know, you kind of treat me like I'm a chicken. My mother was a crazy woman. I got so many crazy stories about her. I'm going to tell one. Let me see if I can think of a crazy story. Okay, so everybody in my family is Italian. Everybody. All my aunts and uncles and cousins. And the vast majority of them, I'd say like 95%, were born in Italy and raised in Italy. So one of the things that's in common is that the women are obsessed with cooking food that they expect you to eat. And it's not about, they expect you to eat whatever they make. So if they make a crazy amount of food, you got to eat it. And if you don't eat it, they think you're angry at them or something like that. And what happens is when you have family over, everybody, all the women are shouting at you, eat, your mother, she cook for you. And why you don't like, you don't like your mother? You know, that's the type of things that they would say if you don't eat like 3 dishes of spaghetti. And I'm like, you know, I don't want 3 dishes of spaghetti. And you know, the big pots where you cook for like 20 people? We had a family of 5. My mother used to fill that thing up with spaghetti. I was like, you're crazy. You're a crazy lady cooking that much spaghetti. My mother always thought she was such a great cook. Wasn't a great cook. My grandmothers were. My grandmothers were absolutely amazing. I really miss their cooking. Yeah, everybody makes their own tomato sauce. You know, when I was a kid, I used to make tomato sauce with the family. And because I was a boy, I had to operate the machine, which means you're like turning the crank. You had to pour the tomatoes. You know, the women would cook the tomatoes and peel them. I would have to wash them. They don't want to. They don't wash tomatoes. And they do the easy peel. You know what I mean? Like I would have to take off the stems, and they would just do the part where they boil off the skin or whatever. And I'd have to operate the machine, and the machine has like a crank on it. And you just basically turn the crank all day. You're turning this crank, and all this tomato sauce is coming out. And if your family's cheap, you run it through a second time. You know who the cheap relatives are. And we would have to take all that tomato sauce. It takes all day. And we'd have to pick all the tomatoes. It would take forever to pick those tomatoes. I really want to get this guy. And I'm not going to continue my story until he's out of the game. So we used to go to the farm. Hafner's was the name of the farm. And I had to pick tomatoes. And I was, like, ever since I was a child, like 5, 6 years old, I was picking tomatoes. And, you know, it's, a child can do the job. You know, once your parents show you that's a good tomato, you pick the tomato. It's the ones that are basically red and not squishy. And we would pick until the car was filled with bushels of tomatoes. And we would do all the cleaning and the boiling, and we'd have to pick them for my grandmother also. She doesn't pick her own tomatoes. And we would have all these bushels of tomatoes. It would take a week to can them all, and the jars would last for at least a year. Scores 2-7. My team sucks. But my mother's tomato sauce was okay. But my grandmother's, both of them, especially Grandma Judy, her sauce was so good. Her name is Giovanna. Her sauce was so good. And Grandma Rose, her sauce was good too. I love the meat sauce. I know the secret. I know the secret. I will tell you in another video. The secret is they cook 4 different types of meat in the sauce: lamb, pork, chicken, and beef. And when they're done cooking the sauce, they remove the meat, so you get all that meat flavor in the sauce. That's what the secret was. Okay, that's the game.